another Just 5 Mins. This one we've got riding the Blazor train. Okay, so first of all, you've got to know about Blazor, surely. Come on, people. Yes, well, maybe not if you don't live in the Microsoft world. It essentially is the what would you call it? I suppose the latest. Although it has been out a while, it's like the latest sort of framework, I suppose, for building web apps, but without JavaScript. So it's the Blazor bit is WebAssembly bit, but that's a bit misleading because there's two flavors, or is there? And we'll get to that shortly. But essentially, you've got WebAssembly. If you look back in the episodes list, definitely about WebAssembly and some early Blazor ones from actually probably a couple of years ago now. But WebAssembly lives in the browser, and essentially it lets you execute code like in the Microsoft world, it's .NET, C# code that gets compiled down, and it can be loaded as a DLL, but it's still sandboxed, just like it is in JavaScript. But of course, you're not limited. WASM, or WebAssembly, as they call it, you can write C++, Rust, there's a countless other languages, and it's pretty much supported by all of the modern browsers, and by that I mean certainly in the last few years. You can look back, but it's definitely, if you haven't got an up-to-date browser from about 3, 4, 5 years ago, there's something wrong. But anyway, the idea is it does so. The promise was the fact that WebAssembly you can run essentially compiled .NET code. But when it first came out and the WebAssembly part was there, the problem was a problem where it used to take a while to load because it was loading those DLLs, and depending on the size of those DLLs, because again it was the .NET runtime as well. But over the years, certainly up to like .NET 6 and then .NET 7, that package size got vastly reduced. Okay, but there was also a server-side, and there is a server-side version of Blazor. And so it uses a clever sort of device like SignalR, basically, to handle the communication between the client and the server, to do all the rendering and everything on the server. And it does some clever updates, a little bit like the Shadow DOM in things like React and stuff like that in Vue. So it only changes the things in the web page that actually need to change. But anyway, there's been a few issues, there's been some improvements, because the thing was with the Blazor server, it sounded really good, but you need a Blazor server. You need a server to handle all that UI stuff. And depending on the target audience, you might need a lot of resources there to handle that. Whereas WebAssembly runs completely, on its on the client, as it were, and of course you will then need to handle access to databases via APIs as you would with React or Angular and stuff like that. Although I know there's lots of other wonderful things providing server-side rendering as well for those technologies. But the idea that there was a lot of major upgrades in .NET 7, there's no doubt about it. Performance, there's a lot of good stuff that happened. And also they sort of split it a little bit. So you've got hybrid. So MAUI, again, I've done another episode on that before, which is the cross-platform UI, basically. And that allows you to build, is based on Xamarin of old, and you can build not only sort of mobile apps, but desktop apps for Mac, Windows, Android, iOS. But there's a hybrid Blazor MAUI as well. But there was also lots of other things. You can use components into other different technologies. But Blazor 8 is the one that really seems to be where they've got the stride. And it's almost like a default now, building ASP.NET with Blazor, and it's got some very clever stuff. I've got a blog post that I'll link to for the details, and in all fairness, a lot of good stuff's been done by Carl Franklin of .NET Rocks fame. He's done Blazor Train, basically, and I think in conjunction with DevExpress, but there's some really good videos, a lot of in-depth training there. He's done a really good job there, so I can't take any credit for that, but there is a blog post that summarizes the changes, but one of the big ones is that you've got auto operation of Blazor, so you can start with server side rendering, then when WebAssembly is kicked in, like it's been loaded, the runtime, it can switch to that. But there's lots of different things that you can actually do. It seems to be where I think Blazor 8 or .NET 8 is where it's really got its stride. So it's worth checking out if you haven't already for Blazor. Yeah, so that's where I'm going to leave it this time. We'll catch you on the next one.